This is a response to I guess you could say, the first official episode of TMNT Tuesdays by James Wolfe and Mike Mattel, otherwise known as Angry Video Game Nerd and Motherfucker Mike of Cinemassacre.com. And they were talking about and giving their thoughts on the new TMNT Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that's going to be released supposedly next year. Right now, that's the planned release year. We don't know the exact month or date. As far as I know, I don't know it, but we do know it's next year, supposedly, or around next year. Now, they gave their thoughts on what they feel should be put into the movie. Because from what they understand, the movie sounds like it's going to be another reboot, or another retelling of the origin story. Basically, another retelling of it. And, Mike said he didn't want to have another retelling, and James agreed on it. They didn't want to have it. Mike said he'd rather have the movie animated, traditionally animated, instead of live action, which James was in favor of. But from what I understand, it's sort of going to be a combination of both. It's going to be live action with I think the Turtles and whatever other mutant characters may be in there or not, but mainly with the Turtles and, like I said, whatever other mutant characters like Splinter. Like the Turtles and Splinter, we know it's going to be it's going to be CGI. So it's basically going to be like live action / CGI, sort of like with Transformers. I know there are some fans out there that are kind of 50-50 on that. Sometimes they embrace the live action CGI hybrid. Some of them don't. But that's apparently what's being proposed for the new Ninja Turtles movie. Now, I figured, since I watched it, I should give my thoughts on it and, kind of talk about a few things they did. Now, I do agree that by now anybody that's watched the Ninja Turtles has seen the Ninja Turtle movies, have seen the classic 80s cartoon, and even the 90s cartoon, not 90s, but the updated 2000s cartoon, and they've seen the origin stories. They've seen the origin story of April meeting the Turtles when she's a TV reporter for Channel 6. They've seen her meet him when she's a scientist or former lab assistant to Baxter Stockman, like in the original. They've seen all that. So I do agree that maybe we need a continuation, sort of like what we got with TMNT about 4 years ago. So that was sort of like a continuation, if you will, or sort of like an in-between continuation, if you will, of the animated cartoon that you saw on Fox, because everything was already established. The only thing that was different is you had some well-known actors in there doing the voices. Like you had Sarah Michelle Gellar doing the voice of April. You had Patrick Stewart doing the voice of Winters, is his name is, I think. So you had them in there, but I think. And I believe that's what James and Mike are saying. They want to go in that. That if they're going to do a movie, it should go in that direction. And I agree, it should probably go in that direction eventually. But the way I see it, if they're doing a retelling of the origin stories, I think the way they're doing it is the way they probably should have done it in the first live action, in the first movie back in 1990, and that's telling it the way you see it in the comic books. But if I had my choice, I would do the origin as you see in the comic books, the original origin. I would stick with that. I mean, I have nothing against the origin of her being, a reporter from Channel 6 and all that. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I embrace that. If they want to go in that direction, go ahead. But I think I have a feeling they're going to do more of a retelling of the original origin. But if I was them, But here's the thing. If I had my way with this new Ninja Turtles movie, I'd make it a bit of a hybrid. Now, what I mean by a hybrid is I would combine some of the best elements from all kind of continuities as far as the Turtles go. I'd combine the elements from the original story format from the early to mid '80s. I'd combine some of the best elements from the '80s cartoons. I'd combine some of the best elements from the Archie Comics comic book release when Archie Comics was publishing them. I'd take some of the best elements from the IDW, Dreamwave, whatever it is, version of them. I'd take some of the best elements from the recent reincarnation in 2000. I'd take all those some of the best elements out of all those, and combine them into one continuity, which everybody would like. And I would start that with the movie. I'd start doing that with this new movie. I'd combine all those into one hybrid continuity. Take the best of 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 all those different continuities and versions of the Turtles and put them into one continuity in this new movie. And personally, here's some of the things I would do. Like I said, from the original story written by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, I would keep it the way it is. I'd keep April as a lab assistant or some kind of a scientist person and have her meet the Turtles that way. I would then in a way add some other elements in there as well. Like, if you're going to add mutants in there to face the Ninja Turtles, to be countered by the Ninja Turtles, then I would bring in maybe a Bebop and a Rocksteady. I would do that. But I'd also bring in Han from the new one. Because Han from the new Ninja Turtles cartoon was badass. There's no doubt about that. Bring him in and see what happens there. That would be a great addition. To start out, here's the thing. If you want to start out, like I say, retelling it, take the best elements, bring in a guy like, bring in Shredder, of course, and instead of sticking him with another ninja guy like they did in the first two movies, I think his name is Tatsu. Instead of sticking him with a guy like that, stick him with a guy stick him with Han. Get some big muscle guy out there, a wrestler or an MMA guy or whatever, and have that guy play Han. Because I guarantee you that would be worth it right there. Because I tell you, when you watch the more recent version of the Turtles, the original and Back to the Sewer, this Han literally kicked ass. I mean, he beat the Turtles up a lot. There's no doubt about it. So put him in there. That's what I would do. And again, like I said, I'd make it a hybrid. I'd do the original retelling. I know that when they did the 1990 film, they did a retelling, sort of. They did a hybrid telling of the origins of the Turtles. Basically they took April being a reporter. They kept that. But instead of going like, oh, by the way, Hamato Yoshi is Splinter and Splinter is Hamato Yoshi, they instead used the original story origin of how Splinter and the Turtles came to be. So that was pretty good. But they combined it with some of the elements from the cartoon. But again, that's how I would do it. What else? Well, again, I would kind of keep it like that. I do a retelling. And I know they feel that they don't need Casey Jones in the movie, but you know what? I would bring Casey Jones in. I would bring him in. There's no doubt about it. I'd bring him in, and I would bring him in similar to almost like kind of a hybrid of what you saw in the cartoons. He first has the mask on for a while, and he doesn't take it off until let's say maybe he gets hurt or something like that. Then they take it off, and let's say April's the one that takes it off, and she sees that he's actually a handsome-looking kind of guy, and that's when she starts to fall for him. That's how I would do it. Have him wear the mask for almost like maybe a majority of the movie, and then when he gets hurt, then let's say he gets hurt to the point that they need to take him someplace safe to recover. She takes his mask off while, let's say, he's unconscious, and then she sees him as a handsome guy and starts to fall for him. I would do it like that. What else? But basically, I'd keep it that simple. I'd kind of would do that. I'd give this Shredder, the Shredder in this movie, I'd give him a little bit of a technical advantage because again, like I said, the 1990 film sort of was a hybrid of both the cartoon and the original story format. But like I said, I would make this a hybrid of all the best of every continuity inversion of the Turtles throughout the years. So what I would do, like I said, I'd give this Shredder sort of the same origin backstory that he had in the original, but give him more of a technological advantage. In other words, give him something technologically sort of an advantage, if you will, technologically, not just ninja-wise and everything, but technological. That's sort of like a nod towards like the 80s cartoon and maybe a little bit of the recent 2003 version. Now, we all know that if this happens, there's bound to be probably an animated series made before or around or after it. And that's what's also being proposed as a new animated series. If that is to happen, if a new animated series is made before it, and let's say this movie, comes out in between, here's what I would do as far as like say a new season goes. A new season, I would sort of make it as dark as the movie is, or depending on how dark the movie would be, I'd make it in sort of that way. But I'd also introduce new characters that later on in, like, say, the movies, if they start doing a series on them, get introduced as well. Like, for example, here's what I would do. Here's what I would do with the cartoon if the movie gets released while the cartoon is on. I would introduce in the second, let's say, I don't know, like, what season the movie would be released in between, either between the first season or second and third. But depending on whether it's the second or third season, here's what I would do. In one of those two seasons, I would introduce some of the characters from the original 80s cartoon, some of the original mutant characters from the original 80s cartoons, the 2003 version, as well as from the comic books. More importantly, the Archie comic books. That's what I would do. Because one character I feel that was left out in the loop when it came to the cartoons and everything, and I feel would be a great addition because I believe she's been brought back in the Forever War story. I don't know if that's been released or not by Archie Comics. But the character I would like to see animate in an animated form would be Ninjara Yumiko. She's a humanoid fox. She was introduced in at the end in the last page of issue 28 and then fully introduced in issue 29, where she went from being an assassin and a bad girl to being a good girl and being part of the Ninja Turtles team and being Raphael's love interest. I think if you put her in the new cartoon, whether it's like the second or third season, depending on if the movie was to come out in between that time, I would put her in there. And if it comes out before, I would put her in the first season or towards the end of the first season and fully develop her in the second season. That's what I would do. I would bring in characters like Bebop and Rocksteady, and I do agree with James and Mike on this. I'd make Bebop and Rocksteady more badass than dumb. I'd bring in Toka and Reza and have them sort of like clash with Bebop and Rocksteady, make them more badass as well. I'd bring in all these other characters, all these other mutant characters that I felt were the best of the best of all different continuities. That's what I would do. And then as far as the movie would go, if they were to do a series of movies like they've been doing, let's say with Transformers, this is what I would do. If they're going to do a series of movies like they've done before and like they're currently doing with something like Transformers, here's what I would do. I would take some of the best mutant characters out of all the continuities, and I would put them into the second movie. And here's how I would do it. I would have the Turtles for the second movie along with April go on a trip to Japan, if you will, sort of like a vacation. But again, have either Shredder, if he survives, because apparently that's been his MO, even in the new 2003 cartoon version. And in the first, and at the beginning of the second movie, he sort of survives and everything. So, that's what I would. I'd either have Shredder